All right, today we're tackling a huge topic, one that honestly affects every single one of us: food waste. We're going to dig into why this is such a massive problem, and more importantly, what we can actually do about it.
So to really get this, we have to start with a deeply held cultural belief. In India, food isn't just, well, food. It's considered sacred. Food grains are literally treated like gods. It's this beautiful, ingrained idea that wasting food is a huge sign of disrespect. Sounds amazing, right? But just hold that thought for a second.
Because then you see this number. A recent survey found that a whopping 40% of food is just thrown away around wedding locations. 40%. That's almost half. So what's going on here? How can you have a culture that worships food, but at the same time wastes so much of it?
And that brings us right to our first section. We're going to dive into this really shocking contradiction.
I mean, just look at this. It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? On one hand, the source we're looking at points out that you have millions of people, over 660,000 families, who have to beg to survive. Some are even forced to look for food in the exact same garbage bins where others are throwing away their leftovers. And then on the other hand, you have these huge, extravagant weddings and parties where literal tons of perfectly good food are just wasted. It's a really tough thing to wrap your head around.
Okay, so what's the real cost of all this waste? Let's break down the numbers, because they are pretty staggering.
Get this. The World Food Organization says the value of the food we waste every single year is about 120 billion rupees. That's enough money to improve the lives of 50 million children. You know, we hear about all these government programs that cost billions. Just imagine if we could redirect that wasted value. It's just a massive loss, economically and socially.
But you know, it's not just about the money. There's a human cost here, and it's absolutely devastating. Every year, 10 lakh, that's 1 million, kids under the age of 5 die from malnutrition. And that's not just some abstract number. That's a tragic reality happening at the exact same time that mountains of food are being thrown in the trash.
And it doesn't even stop there. All this waste has a huge environmental footprint. The source material points out that when food rots in landfills, it releases more than 3 billion tons of dangerous greenhouse gases every single year. So our carelessness is actually harming the planet.
Okay, just let this next part really sink in for a minute. This quote from the analysis we're using just puts everything into perspective. It says, the value of the wasted grain. We're not even talking about all wasted food. Just the grain is enough to feed 30 crore people for a whole year. That's 300 million people. It's unbelievable. It feels like the solution to hunger might literally be sitting in our garbage.
So you have to ask, right? If the problem is this bad and the solution seems so obvious, then why is this even happening? Let's get into the root causes.
Well, the source points to a few big reasons, and they're happening at every level of society. First up, you've got these massive social gatherings, weddings, festivals, where showing hospitality often means making way too much food, which leads to huge amounts of waste. Then there's government inefficiency. Get this, 21 million tons of wheat just rots because there aren't proper storage facilities. It goes bad before it can even get to anyone. Then, of course, it comes down to us, our habits at home, just being careless or not planning ahead. And finally, there's this trend. A recent survey shows that as people can afford more, they tend to spend more, and that often leads to wasting more. So yeah, it's a really deep-rooted systemic problem. And all of this, all these tough realities, are laid out right there in the source article for this explainer. It really doesn't pull any punches and makes it clear that we need a major shift in how we think and act.
But look, it's not all bad news. The analysis doesn't just point out the problems. It also talks about solutions. So let's look at the path forward. So the source suggests this kind of three-step approach. First, we've got government action. That's essential. For example, the Delhi government started an initiative to cut down on food waste in big venues like hotels and farmhouses. Second, community efforts. These are making a huge difference. You have volunteer groups like Roti Bank that go around collecting leftover food to give to people who are hungry. And the third piece of the puzzle? Well, that's us. It's about individual responsibility. It's the small things, right? Like teaching kids not to pile their plates too high and just being more mindful of our own habits. And that really brings us to this powerful idea from the chef Thomas Keller that kind of reframes this whole thing. He said, respect for food is a respect for life, for who we are and what we do. When you think about it that way, it's not just about, managing resources better. It's about something much deeper, a basic respect for life itself.
So I guess I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. What if we stop looking at food as just something to buy and consume? What if every single meal was a chance to show respect? Respect for life, respect for our planet, and respect for each other. Something to chew on. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.